Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chris Atkinson.
Welcome to Orlando TechEd 2000. My name is Chris Atkinson and I'm Vice President of the Windows DNA and Web Services Developer Group. Now, as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm from across the pond, where TechEd is also a highly successful event, but nothing on this scale. We were originally hoping to welcome 10,000 people to attend TechEd this year. Unfortunately, that proved impossible. This year we have a record 14,000 people here at TechEd. That is amazing when you think that the first TechEd was attended by a mere 3,000. The hall sold out months ago, and you'll find 300 companies demonstrating some incredibly cool technologies. So enjoy the feast while you're here. Now, one thing TechEd has in common with its sister event in Europe, it's a great gathering of like-minded people. And it's not just Europe. The event is rolling out in Australia, Brazil, Beijing, Hong Kong, Bangalore, Japan, Korea, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Singapore, South Africa, Taiwan, and I've lost track of where else. 35,000 attendees will experience TechEd in the year 2000. That's 10 times the attendance of the original TechEd 1. Now, one TechEd Europe statistic that may surprise you is what we call the spouse attendance factor. 2 years ago, we held TechEd Europe in the south of France. Beautiful beaches, sun, sea, sand. The spouse attendance factor reached an all-time high at nearly 50%. Last year, we decided to move TechEd Europe to downtown Amsterdam. Surprisingly, the spouse attendance factor dropped by 90%. What is it about those Rembrandt pictures? This year, by popular demand, in 3 weeks' time, TechEd Europe's back in downtown Amsterdam. You see lots of t-shirts wandering around a certain place, and if anybody would like to go to Amsterdam, I may have a few tickets in my back pocket. See me after the show. Another great thing about TechEd is it's an opportunity to really roll up your sleeves and get down to the practicalities of building great software, developing great software, and most importantly, deploying great software. And what a time it is to roll up your sleeves. In February, we shipped Windows 2000 to widespread acclaim, and we have a pipeline of 7 tremendous server applications in the form of Windows DNA 2000 coming on down the pipe. SQL Server, Exchange Server, BizTalk Server, Commerce Server, Application Center, and more. Now, launching this number of servers in 1 year is unprecedented in the history of Microsoft, if not the industry. It really is time to build the business internet. Now, we've designed TechEd 2000 to help you to really drill into these new products. And we sincerely hope that you will use them in building many great applications for your organizations. Your success is our success. We will fail without you. Our number one priority is to listen to your needs and to simply make every single release of every Microsoft product better. At TechEd 2000, for the first time this year, we're actually webcasting 35 sessions to the many thousands of people who are unfortunate not to be able to attend and be with us at the event this year. This is also good for you. You can now relive TechEd 2000 from the comfort of your own PC when you get home. Complete information will be mailed to you after the show. Oh, and if by any chance you happen to overindulge at one of the many TechEd parties this year, then fear not, all is not lost. So what's in store for you today at TechEd? We're very pleased to welcome back Bill Gates, who will share his vision of the future with us. And after a busy day, you can unwind, catch some food, and enjoy a drink, or two, or three, with your colleagues and the exhibitors in the exhibit hall this evening at 6:30 p.m. But last, and by no means least, no TechEd is complete without its commemorative T-shirt. So for the first demonstration at TechEd, I'm delighted to welcome the one and only Tony Jennings, our producer extraordinaire at TechEd 2000 this year. Tony, a wonderful little black number that you're demonstrating for us here. Tony has been working very many hours since September to put together this entire event with her full team. And Tony, this is the third TechEd that you've produced for us this year. So please join me in giving Tony a round of applause for all the tremendous work she's put in. Thank you, Tony. Now, after Bill's keynote, you will find tables laden with TechEd 2000 t-shirts just outside. So look out for your size. Now, it just remains for me to say, once again, that it really has been my great pleasure to welcome you to TechEd 2000 this year. We really appreciate you being with us. Thank you for your support. Now, let the show begin. Thank you.
Welcome.
Every day. Every day.
Welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Bill Gates.
Thank you. Well, good morning. It's incredible to see the great group we have here and have this chance to talk about where the industry is going. Back at the beginning, the vision that the microprocessor would create a revolutionary tool in the personal computer was not something that was widely understood. And getting the personal computer to critical mass, allowing it to become a tool for literally tens of thousands of applications, and building a whole industry around it, has been the legacy of Microsoft's work. As we look forward now, the impact of our activities are even greater than any time in our history. We have today not only the huge installed base of personal computers and the dynamic software industry that's grown up around it, but also now the internet as a revolutionary tool. It's redefining communications. And over the next decade, it'll redefine business and the way people learn, and even the way they're entertained. What I want to share with you this morning is how software is a key ingredient that's going to change the internet from the way we know it today to something dramatically more powerful. And so I've entitled this talk, Building the Internet's Next Phase. Now, if you look at the business mania around the internet, you could say that it's going into a new phase. The first phase of the internet was really about presence, making sure that everybody had a website. And there became a real demand that every company, large and small, get out there and at least have something on the internet. People weren't quite sure why they were doing it, but they knew they had to have a URL. Their kids were asking them when they came home, "Dad, do you have a URL?" Phase 2 of the internet was about transactions and various people trying to set records saying, "Hey, I have this much gross revenue, I have that much gross revenue." Some of that was matching of buyers and sellers who never would have found each other in the past. Some of it was simply taking transactions that would have been done through paper purchase orders and saying that the business was done on the internet, although really the change was quite trivial in terms of what that meant. But in this phase, the announcements were all about growth of revenues. Well, I'd say that in the last few months, people have recognized that there's a new phase that's very important, and that's a focus on how the internet can change profitability. Profitability for the startups that so much has been invested in, and perhaps even more importantly, profitability for existing companies. And profitability, not just by having gross revenues, but by taking every process in the business and seeing how the internet can be used to make it more efficient. Now, I think it was inevitable that we would get to this phase. All technologies go through sort of a honeymoon period, and eventually you get down to the bottom line, well, how is it really going to affect business? I think this phase will be a very, very exciting phase where the simple notions or the manias of the first two phases will no longer be how people think about what's important. What does it mean technically? Where are we going with the internet? Given that it's connecting up all these different sites, it's got all this momentum, does it really need to change at all? And what you'll hear from me today, and really a theme of this event, is the answer is yes. We need a new generation of software tools that are going to make it easy to build the websites for this phase 3. Today, when we think of the internet, it's almost like having millions and millions of terminals that can connect up to any large computer. This is a little bit like having 3270s. The protocol is overwhelmingly a presentation protocol. You look at one site at a time, and when you see the information from that site, it's according to whoever wanted to author that site, that's what you see. So it's primarily about reading information. If you take a typical task of a knowledge worker, say to plan a new product, they'll find themselves going out to many websites trying to gather the data about the future of the economy, say, or manufacturing capacity. But the information they gather, they either have to scribble down on a piece of paper or use the clipboard against information that was really only designed to be read. The way we interact with the internet is overwhelmingly through the keyboard today. And most business activity is really done offline. Now, in this next generation, instead of simply thinking about the internet as a presentation device, we think about it as a platform. And we run applications in the internet. We store the information that people care about in the internet. You could say that we're moving from the personal computer being the sole platform here to the internet being the platform. And there's a lot of things we can do when we think about it in that way. We can think about not making people have to move their information around from PC to PC or from a PC to another device. We can store that information for them. This idea of hosted services is really a key element of the internet as a programming platform. Once we think about a program acting on our behalf and gathering information from many sites on the internet, then we can think about personalized information. We can think about rich views. We can think about collaboration where we're editing that information, annotating it, adding to it, and doing the primary job of the knowledge worker, which is over half of the entire economy, is investing in making those knowledge workers more effective. It's also a time where, although the keyboard will be important, these natural interface technologies will get to critical mass. Today, the amount of email I get that has handwriting or voice annotation in it is very, very small. It's kind of a novelty. And yet, in this picture, I would say that the majority of email messages will come in some form other than purely typed in message. And so the goal here is to get all the collaboration, all the economic activity online with the benefits of the digital approach. Now, what assumptions are we making that allow us to be so optimistic about this next phase? Well, I'll talk mostly about the software breakthroughs that we're driving that are key to this. But in parallel with that, we are assuming that the fantastic hardware companies continue to make very, very rapid advances. We're assuming that connectivity speeds continue to increase. Broadband, which we have today to most businesses, will be pervasive, eventually even into consumers' homes and in countries outside the United States. We're assuming that digital wireless is more than just a transport for voice communication. We're assuming that the wireless world connects to the internet world, and so you don't have to author a website many different times. You can use the new tools I'll be talking about, and anybody with a wireless device and any kind of screen will be able to have your site appear and adapt itself dynamically to the size of that screen and the interests of the user. We're assuming that authentication becomes very trustable and that through smart cards and other biometric type capabilities, we can know who we're talking to on the internet. We're assuming that the PC continues to get dramatically better, not just in a numeric sense where we'll get processors that are 10 times faster, local disk storage 10 times as large, but we're also assuming that it becomes much more of a communications tool. The standard microphone that's built in will allow for real-time collaboration. The camera that's built in will allow you to share information and meet with people at a distance. The form factor of the PC will be changing as well, getting smaller and therefore more convenient. We're assuming that most phones will start to have screens. And so in fact, instead of viewing the PC and the phone as in two different worlds, you'll view them as almost a spectrum of devices, with the screen getting larger and larger and the local richness of the device and its ability to work offline getting richer and richer as well. One of the new form factors for the PC will be a tablet form factor, a device that you can take to a meeting, take your notes on, and that becomes natural to use the same way that a paper tablet would have been used in the past. The readability of these tablet devices, along with the smaller electronic books, will mean that for the first time, we don't have a split between our paper world and our digital world. We don't have to go back after meetings and try and decide which notes to type in, or when we go to our terminal to read electronic mail, decide which emails are long enough that we need to print them out. And only in that form can we do the kind of annotation that we're used to with paper. These hardware breakthroughs, as exciting as they are, I think we can guarantee that these will happen. The investment levels, the understanding of the demand for these breakthroughs are all there. And so we can build our software architecture knowing that these things will be present. The same way that the original Microsoft software architectures assumed that the PC industry would turn out breakthrough hardware. When we first came up with the idea of Windows and graphics interface, The machines weren't fast enough, and yet we had faith that if we did our part, that those machines would come along. I have even greater faith here because the size of the market, the focus on this market, is so much greater than back in the days of pioneering graphical interface. Fundamentally, with this hardware and software generation, we really can say that we're moving to a digital world. A world where CDs and records will be something that people talk about as having been in the past, almost like dedicated word processors or calculating machines or typewriters. We can have photos being exchanged purely on a digital basis. I'd say the most ambitious digital media is getting film onto the PC and making it so that typical editing is simple to do. And also taking your notes and with this new tablet PC form factor, having those be something that are easy to go back and find and easy to share in their digital form. Digital business will mean more than just the simple buying and selling transaction. All the issues about exceptions, was it delivered on time, was there a substitution made, all of that, all those events will be mediated in digital form. And you won't have to have these side channels where you're calling up and talking about, well, did that nice simple order go through digitally? Well, now let's deal with the true practicalities of what a complex business relationship looks like. We'll be able to codify those things in digital form. In fact, today we'll be giving you a demonstration of one of the breakthrough tools that'll make that possible. And finally, with knowledge workers, their analysis, their looking up records, even their meetings, their learning, all of those things will proceed in a digital fashion. And so with the hardware and software, these impacts will be far-reaching and I think in every way exciting, because it takes the theme of empowerment, which is what the PC has been all about, and brings it to a whole new level. The experience will be quite different than what we have today. What we've learned from Windows applications, Windows user interface, of course we'll be able to carry that forward. But as we take the best of the browser and the best of the productivity applications and bring those together, that's a new synthesis. As we bring in the natural interface so that documents can have all those different types of input, that's a new synthesis. As we come up with software so that users feel that they're in control, not just in control of avoiding junk mail, not just in control of being notified when things change, but literally being able to say, for any device that they're on, exactly when do they want to be interrupted and what information do they want to see. Whether that information comes from internal applications, whether it comes from websites, whether it comes from a page that's coming in for them, all of that brought together and giving them the software tools so that they are using their time most effectively. All the information they care about available literally on every device. And so that's a new experience that this software foundation will enable. Well, we really have an incredible level of interest in the work that all of us are doing. You can't pick up a magazine or watch a TV show without some allusion to the excitement behind the changes that our industry is bringing not only to this country, but the world at large. Microsoft, just 8 months ago, made the first change to its vision statement to talk about this new scope of how technology will be used. And instead of the original vision that we founded the company with 25 years ago that talked about the PC, we now talk about great software empowering people anytime, any place, on any device. And so as I said earlier, this is the move to the internet as the platform. The benefits really come to the individual. It's your information, it's your time across any experience. And so it's not just a single website deciding what you're going to see, and it's not you having to manage the individual device. The focus is purely on allowing you to get the things done that you want to get done. So now let's focus on what is the underlying software technology that's going to make this all possible. Well, one of the key elements is this new protocol XML. As opposed to HTML that is only designed for presentation, XML is designed for data exchange. It allows programs to exchange information in a very high-level, abstract, self-describing form. And so most of the scenarios of the future, when you want to get something done, there will be literally dozens and dozens of exchange of XML messages between different computers. There's a lot of work to be done around XML. It's really just a starting point. XML gives us an opportunity to have these rich descriptions. These descriptions, which are often referred to as schemas, need not only to be standardized in various industries, things like what does a health record look like, but also we need a generation of tools that are designed to deal with this information, to transform it in different forms, to store it, and to make it easy to program against. And the impact on the software development world will be quite substantial. Tasks that would have been almost impossible to do in the past, making two applications work together, will now become rather simple because of the richness of these tools. And so in the same way that we in 1995 made a big bet on the internet, which at the time meant HTML and browsing, we today throughout our product line are taking XML and saying we know that's going to be popular, we know it's important, and so we're going to lead the way in these advances. Using XML, we can start to think about not just looking at websites, but going out to web services. You know, say you want to take a look at where in the country you might want to sell a particular kind of product, or look at certain kinds of outlets for a product. That's obviously something where today you'd have to go to Yellow Pages, you'd have to go to different mapping sites, you'd have to go look up the catalogs of the different stores, and all you want to do is see a map of where certain types of merchandise can be bought. With web services, XML messages would be sent out to the various sites, and a very rich view would be synthesized for you that brings that information together. And so across all your different activities, this idea of web services will be important. Take, for example, managing your finances. You don't want to have to go to your broker's website, your bank website, to the insurance company's website, just to pull together the information about where things stand. You'd like to see that all in one place. And so we need those websites to move into this XML generation where you can talk to them almost in a program-to-program type fashion. Well, the protocol that sits on top of XML and lets websites do this kind of interchange is one that will be open to everyone, one that will be as pervasive as HTML is today. Microsoft was the initiator of this SOAP, or Simple Object Access Protocol, but we now have a lot of momentum behind this. Many of our fellow large companies, including companies in the industry that are primarily our competitors, have said, yes, this is a very good idea. And so it's now proposed as a standard in front of the W3C, and I know that this will be a very fundamental building block. It really makes the internet the integration fabric, and we are already providing toolkits to let people take what we have today and use SOAP and see the power that this kind of advance brings. Between having this XML capability and wanting to build the rich websites that allows, we do need to take the great work we've done around Visual Studio and bring it to a new level. If you look at websites today, the software that people have had to write is fairly complex. All the different types of files, dealing with scalability, making sure that the code is written in a way that you won't have performance bottlenecks, writing the code in such a way that it works on a down-level browser or even a small screen device. That's been a huge challenge because this class of applications just emerged over the last few years. And nobody's really had a chance to recraft their development tools around this kind of task. Well, that's exactly what we took on right after we shipped Visual Studio 6.0. We said, we are going to take these web applications that have been so tough and really make a huge breakthrough, partly by defining it around XML, partly by doing great language extensions. So between the work we've done on the platform for scalability and the work now that we're doing with the tools, we're going to make even these demanding applications very, very simple to develop. Well, probably the best way to understand why we're so excited about this as a breakthrough, both SOAP itself and the new tools we're working on, is to see a quick demo of how this is going to work in practice. And so to give us a glimpse of this, first time shown ever, I'd like to ask Dave Mendlin, a Visual Studio product planner, to come on up and show us what it's like. Hi, Dave.
Hi, thanks, Bill.
Super.
It is my great pleasure to show you some new features of Visual Studio for the first time here at TechEd. Visual Studio 7 has a number of interesting features, web forms and web services, and I'll talk about Visual Basic's new language characteristics as well. But before I drill into the technology, I want it to be known, I'll be showing you a Visual Basic demo, but the things I'll be doing will work across all of the languages inside of Visual Studio. So I'm going to build an e-commerce website, and what I'll do is I'll expose a web service. And the e-commerce website will be selling wines, red wines, white wines. Let's go ahead and launch this application. So this application, like I said, you can purchase wines, red wines, white wines, or they have this notion of the Wine of the Month Club. What you can sign up for is you pay a fixed rate, and every month you get a different wine. Now the wine seller wants to make this exposed to other companies so they can provide this for other sites. So now this company, the wine seller, can sell this Wine of the Month Club, and everybody that uses it, they'll get the revenue, right? And the other websites will be able to extend their application. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to build a web service that uses the wine seller. And one of the newest features that we're publicly disclosing first here at TechEd is RAD for the server, rapidly creating web services using Visual Studio 7. Now, Microsoft understands RAD, Rapid Application Development, and you've seen developers with Microsoft Windows and Visual Basic rapidly constructing Windows applications by dragging things from a toolbox onto a Windows or onto a window or a form, and basically painting their application. We've taken that concept and applied it to building middle-tier objects and web services. So the first piece of RAD for the server is this Server Explorer. One of the most challenging parts of building middle-tier business components and web services is finding all the server resources that exist out on your network. And now you can go to a single window and see all of these server resources that are available to you. And so things like event logs, performance counters, message queues, all of these things are exposed to you here in this Server Explorer window. Now the next piece of RAD for the server is this notion of a visual component designer. So now, in order to build middle-tier business objects, I'll simply drag and drop objects from the Server Explorer onto the component designer. In fact, what I'm going to do first is drag an event log. And so now if I have any errors in my application, I'll write those errors out to an event log. I also want to use a performance counter so that as orders are placed on my website, I can track how many have been placed. So I've got this orders processed performance counter, which I'll drag and drop to my design surface. And instead of writing code, I simply set properties. So I've added an event log, a performance counter. I also want to add a couple of message queues so that I can interact with mainframes. So I have an accounts receivable mainframe that exists out for accounts receivable so I can get paid as I make my orders. And I also have an inventory pick list. I'm using Microsoft Message Queue to interact with my mainframe. So what you've just seen is I've essentially painted a middle tier business object by dragging and dropping from the Server Explorer onto a component, what we call RAD for the server. Now, we need to write a little code to connect all these things together, so I'll bring up the code window. And I've got a little snippet of code on my toolbox. It's called Order Wine Club. It's a function that, shrink this down a little bit. It's a function that first sends a message to a message queue, and then increments a performance counter, and if there are any errors, writes that out to an event log. Now, obviously, this is a very simple set of code, but what's interesting is to write the same application in Visual Basic 6 might be hundreds of lines of code. But here, it's actually just 5 or 6. And we've actually made it easier to program against these server objects. And so now if you want to do something like receive a message from a message queue or send a message, you just set the appropriate method or property. Oops. And you're done. So I have just constructed a middle tier business object with just 5 or 6 lines of code and dragging and dropping from the Server Explorer onto a component designer. As I said, hundreds of lines of code now you can do in just a few. Very simple to build middle tier business objects. And once you've built a middle tier business object, you might want to expose it as a web service. And that's even easier. If you go up to, if I want to expose a web service, I simply type in dim web public, and that component is now exposed as a web service. And when I compile this component, not only is it compiling locally, it's publishing that component to my web server. It's also creating an XML file that describes this function so that any developer on any platform programming in any language can call this web service. Now, Bill talked about 3 phases of the internet, and that we're in the 3rd phase now. Web services are really about the 3rd phase of reuse. The first phase was Visual Basic custom controls and ActiveX controls. The 2nd phase was COM components, letting us share on a Windows platform business logic. And now with web services, we can share business logic across the internet so that anybody programming in any language on any platform can use web services. So now that we've got this exposed web service, let's take a look at another site that wants to use this web service. I've got the Market Florist e-commerce website, and they sell flowers. And I've got it open here in the shared Visual Studio IDE. It's important to understand that all the languages now are in the same Visual Studio integrated development environment. We all have the ability to interact with web forms, as I'll do here now. So before I start authoring up my page, I want to connect to a web service, that one we just created. And again, I'll just go back to the Server Explorer, and it'll find all of the exposed web services. And here is the one I just created on the wine cellar site. And it's got a function called Order Wine Club. So to use it, I simply right-click and say Add to Market Florist, and that creates a reference to that web service. And now I can program against that web service as though it's a first-class Visual Basic object. I get full statement completion, IntelliSense. It's all there. So I want to extend this website. Now that I've created a link to that Wine Club web service, we need to change the user interface to take advantage of it. And the way we'll do that is with web forms that are part of Visual Studio. So I'll simply drag and drop. And one of the neat new things about the way that you interact with the web is this web forms technology. With web forms, you drag and drop, and you build web applications the same way Visual Basic developers build Windows applications, by dragging and dropping from a toolbox. In this case, I'm going to drag a new grid control called the data list. It's a data-bound grid control that displays not only text and numbers, but also pictures. And so now in Visual Basic, if you want to write some code behind an object, you simply double-click, and it takes you right to the event handler. So we're looking at the click event for this new data list. And what I'll do is I'll simply define a new instance of a shopping cart. And I'll add this, what I'll call this web services add to cart method. And let's pass in, let's see, red wine. And we'll make it $199.23 for an annual subscription to Wine of the Month. Now, I've created a shopping cart component. Let's take a look at what that shopping cart component is. It's actually taking full advantage of the Visual Basic 7's new language characteristics. We now in Visual Basic 7 have inheritance. We have full object-oriented programming. You have inheritance, encapsulation, and overloading, all the pieces that you need to build a first-class object-oriented programming language. So what we're also using is structured exception handling. You can see down here in this add to cart, we're using try, catch. And that's going to simplify your error handling because you can centralize your error handling in a single location. So now that we've wired this thing together, we've created a web service in Visual Basic. We've exposed it out using RAD for the server. We've connected it to a web form. And we're using the full Visual Basic language with inheritance and with structured exception handling. And this is great, and we're using Microsoft Windows technologies to make this happen. But what if you wanted to use a web service on the internet that wasn't running on a Windows box? Well, it just so happens that there's another site out on the internet called Wingtip Toys, and it's actually running on Unix. Now, they've built this site using Java Corba objects running on Unix. Well, they've exposed their functionality. This Wingtip Toys, they sell toys on the internet, and they've created a web service for purchasing bears. Well, that's perfect for market florists. They want to sell bears on their site as well. So now, if I go back to Visual Studio, in order for me to take advantage of that website and that web service, I simply point at it. And what I'm pointing at is an XML file that exists on that Unix machine. That XML file describes the public interfaces of that web service. And so now when I click OK, we've added a reference to that web service, and now I can program against it in a rich way, IntelliSense, statement completion. I'm completely wired up to that web service. So now I'll go ahead and run the application, and let's test it out and see if it works. What I want to do now is split the screens, and you can see that we have on one screen the Market Florist website, and on the other, I've brought up the performance counter and the Microsoft Management Console for MSMQ. And what we'll do is, as I'm placing orders, you'll be able to see real time that we're updating our message queues and we're updating our order counter. So I'll purchase some flowers, and we'll buy some teddy bears, and we'll buy a Wine of the Month. Now we'll check out at the shopping cart, and it looks like it's everything I'm looking for. It's $270. They have my credit card on file, so to check out, I simply click on the checkout button. And it's going over the internet and calling both web services, invoking my Unix components and invoking my Windows RAD for the server web service. And so, as I continue to place orders, you should see it updating. So what you've just seen is the rapid construction of a web service using RAD for the server, using web forms to construct a user interface that is broad reach, runs on any browser, on any platform, with the full Visual Basic language running on the server. And we've used the full Visual Basic language with inheritance and structured exception handling. Now, Visual Studio 7 will ship an alpha in the summer, a beta in the fall, and we'll ship it when it's ready. However, web services are so important to what you're going to do every day. You need to do this now. You need to do this today. And so I'm excited to tell you that we're announcing the SOAP Toolkit for Visual Studio 6. It's available on MSDN right now. And let me show you what that is. It's really made up of two pieces. The SOAP toolkit for Visual Studio 6 has two pieces. One, a wizard that lets you expose any COM component as a web service. And second, in Visual Basic, the ability to call any web service and use it directly inside of VB. So to show you, I've actually built a web service on the internet that does translation. It translates from English to Spanish, French to German, and that's already out on the internet. And I want to use that. I want to show you how simple it is for developers to use this SOAP toolkit as part of their applications. So the first line in my code, I'm connecting to the SOAP toolkit. The second line of my code, I'm connecting to a web service, and this web service exposes an XML file that gets generated automatically by the SOAP toolkit wizard. And finally, I can then call the methods of that component. In this case, I'm calling the translate method, and I'm passing in German and the text box, the contents of my text box. So let's run the application. So I'm typing in "Good morning, TechEd," and "Welcome." And when I click Translate, we'll actually go out over the internet and call that web service and return back in real time the German version of that same text. Now that's a really powerful web service. And you can imagine, thank you. That's a really powerful web service. And you can imagine a lot of uses for translating from one language to another. One of the most interesting is in mail. Often at Microsoft, I'm communicating with people in Germany or in France or in Japan, and it would be great if I could write my email in English and have them read it in French. So I've built the same code as a COM add-in in Microsoft Outlook using the exact same VB code. And you can see that we've extended Microsoft Outlook with this COM add-in. We've got this ability to choose what kind of translation we're working with. And I'll just author up a new email message to Bill Gates. And let's see, why don't we say, "Get ready for a standing ovation." And I'll click send, and real time, this message has gone out to the web service. And if I go in my outbox, that's what the other person sees. So the SOAP toolkit for Visual Studio 6 provides the plumbing that you need to build web services today with Visual Studio 6. You can get this on MSDN now, and you notice that in the Visual Basic code, it was only really 3 lines of code to use one of these web services, and you can expose your existing web services through a wizard. The best part is, you already know how to do it. Thank you.
Good job. Okay. So as the programming tools understand XML, literally the XML is automatically generated just because you're using the right high-level programming tool. We still have the issue of how do we take these complex processes where businesses are interchanging information with each other and get those into a form that we know it's right and we know we can trust the internet as the way for all those events to move back and forth. When we think of a transaction, it's often a lot more than just, I want to buy this for this price. If you have many things you need to deliver, if they're going to be late, if there's some sort of substitution, if the currency rate changes, you need lots of messages going back and forth. It can't be a batch-oriented process to deal with the real complexities of supply chain management and other relationships. In fact, it can't even really be a point-to-point connection because you need lots and lots of entities involved in these business transactions. So as we thought about this, we said we need to let people take business processes and write them out, explain if there's a return, how that works, if if something doesn't happen on time, how that works, to be very explicit about all the things that go on. And we said we need to make this something that's very, very visual. Well, as we thought about it, we realized that was another case where we could use XML to make sure that there's an explicit description that can be agreed to of all the parties that are involved. Although at first we thought about this primarily in the business-to-business context, we immediately realized it could also be used inside one company. That is, that describing the processes and the flow of information in a visual way, in a sense that a business analyst would appreciate, and connecting that up to the code in an automatic fashion. That's something that applies across different applications within a single company. And so we said there's a need here for a new kind of tool. We've named this new tool BizTalk Orchestration. It's a technology for business process orchestration. And it lets you visually design and build these business processes. And it's quite interesting how, through the use of XML, these things really can become the glue that span different platforms, span the different applications, and of course span those business boundaries. Because this is a new area, describing it again is, I think, falls short of really being able to appreciate what we've got here. So I'd like to ask David Washer to come on up. He's a product manager for BizTalk, and show us what it's like. What does it mean to visually design a business process? Welcome, David. Hi.
Well, as Bill said, today we are announcing BizTalk Orchestration. It's revolutionary new technology that we're putting into BizTalk Server, which is going to be available in beta later this summer. Building the business internet is more than just building applications. It's about orchestrating applications and web services that may be running on multiple platforms, may be running in multiple organizations, and maybe spanning something like a supply chain or a CRM application. And we need to make this exceptionally easy to do, and that's what we're trying to do with BizTalk Orchestration. In fact, we make it as easy to do as drawing a diagram. Our visual design tool is built on top of Visio. What I want to do today is show you a little bit of what BizTalk Orchestration can do by building a quick sample process, and then talk a little bit about how we might use BizTalk Server to orchestrate the back-end business processes of an online retail site. It all begins in the visual design environment. This is where the business analyst and IT professional meets the developer. On the left-hand side of the screen is where the business analyst or the IT professional would use these elements to describe our business process. And then on the right-hand side of the screen is where the software developer would connect that business process up to the components and applications and web services that do the work. Now, today, the process is lost in the code. I mean, it's in there, but it's mixed in with method calls and database functions, and this makes it difficult to build, and it makes it difficult to change. And if we want to upgrade applications, or if we even want to change platforms, we may have to throw everything out and start over from scratch. BizTalk Orchestration allows us to separate out our business process from the software implementation. Let me show you what I mean. I want to build a quick two-step process here, and what I want to do is get an order off of a queue from a customer, and I want to use a telephony component I've built using Visual Basic to give them an automated phone call and let them know that we received their order. So what I've done is I've dragged some action elements out here, and we will connect them together. And let's call our first action get PO. Oh, let's spell it correctly. Didn't spell it correctly. Let's call our second action call the customer. And there we have it. We've designed our business process. This is the first step in using orchestration to build business processes. The second step is connecting this process up to the software components that do the work. Now, I know that my orders come in off of a message queue, so I'm going to drag the message queue adapter onto the screen, and I'm going to indicate which queue we want to get our messages off of. And then we simply need to connect the queue to our get PO action. And we've completed the first step. Now, the second step, after I get the purchase order, I actually want to extract the customer's phone number out of that and use it and pass it to this VB telephony component that's going to call the customer and confirm that we've received their order. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the component adapter onto the screen. And I need to indicate which component it is that I actually want to use. And then I need to indicate which method on that component that I want to call when we get to this step in the process. Once we've done that, let's bring that over here so everyone can see it. Once we've done that, we simply need to connect our second action to the component, and we've completed the process. Now, what have we done here? We've designed our business process, and we've used the adapters for the MSMQ and for COM components to connect the business process up to the things that are doing the work. So if we go ahead and we'll validate this to make sure we've dotted our I's and crossed our T's, make sure we've done everything correctly. Now let's go ahead and save this. And what we're actually doing is compiling this business process into XML. Let's take a look at what that XML looks like. So what we've done, and as you can see, there's a lot of code here, and luckily we don't need to write any of this ourselves. The business process designer does this for us. What we've done is we've designed a process, we've connected it to the components that do the work, and we've compiled it into an application. This XML code is the code that will be executed at runtime by the BizTalk orchestration engine. So now that we've compiled it, I want to go ahead and run this process. I've written a simple VB script that's going to run it. We'll go ahead and run it. And if it all works correctly, I should be getting a phone call on my cell phone here in a few seconds, letting me know that they have, in fact, received the order that we've taken off of the queue and handed to the Visual Basic component. So if we go ahead and answer that.
This is a message from worldwide suppliers to inform you that order 1040 has been received and will be shipped within 3 working days.
Great. So we know that our component works. So if you think that's cool, we're going to do something much more cool in a minute. So now that we know that our component works, let's look at how we might use BizTalk Server to orchestrate the back-end business processes of an online retail site. So I'm going to go up to my site. I'm going to log in. This is DNAyourbusiness.com, and we've built this site entirely on top of DNA 2000 server products. Now tomorrow in Bob Muglia's keynote, Dave Kochi is going to go into more detail on how we use these products to build this site. What I'm going to do today is show you how we use BizTalk orchestration and BizTalk Server to orchestrate the business processes that go on behind the scenes at this website. So I've come up here before and done a lot of shopping, so it knows who I am. So I need something to do while I'm at work, and so I think I'll pick up some productivity software here I can spend some time on. And I've shopped here before, so it has all of my information. I'll choose standard shipping. It knows what my credit card is. And I've placed my order. So what happened from when I submitted my order to when I actually received my Age of Empires? Well, a lot of things happen. As you can see, this is just a simple diagram of what goes on behind the scenes here. There are a number of places where we need to integrate applications together, and some of those applications are running on different platforms. If you look on the right-hand side of the screen, you see that there's a number of places where we cross the firewall, where we go across the internet and deal with our suppliers and deal with our shippers, and we deal with the credit card validation service. So this is a non-trivial process. I want to show you what this process looks like when we design it using BizTalk orchestration. Now this is just a view. We could scroll up and down and look at the rest of it, but as you can see, there's a lot going on here. And I could walk you through the entire process, but we don't have time to do that. Fortunately, there are a number of sessions over the course of this week that are going to go into detail on how to use this stuff. What I want to focus on is right here. What happens after we receive a purchase order? Well, right now, we send the purchase order to our supplier. We update our inventory status, and we send our customer an email letting them know that we've received their order. But you know what? I want to use that cool VB component to call them as well after we receive their order. So I'm going to show you how easy it is to change this business process so that this process not only will send a purchase order, update the inventory status, and send an email, but it'll also use that component to call the customer and let them know that we received their order. The first step, obviously, is to change our process. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to call this action, call the customer. And then I'm going to hook it up to these elements. And you notice that all of these things are happening concurrently. They're happening at the same time. Then they're getting synchronized up at this point here at the bottom. What that means is that we won't move on to the next step in the process until all 4 of these things have completed. BizTalk orchestration takes care of the complexity of that for you. You as a developer do not need to worry about that anymore. The last step, obviously, after we've changed our business process here is we need to connect it to the components that are going to do the work. In this case, my Visual Basic component. We'll go ahead and connect that up to my component. If we go ahead and save our file, now I've changed my business process. I've connected it up to the new component. If I go through and order again, this time I should receive a phone call letting me know that they received the order because I've added this Visual Basic component to the process. So let's go through it again. Let's order something different this time. We'll go through and check out. Last step there. And if I've done everything correctly by adding this VB component to the process, I should be receiving another phone call in a second letting me know that they have in fact received the order off of the website. Takes a while to spin up. There we go.
This is a message from worldwide suppliers to inform you that order 1045 has been received and will be shipped within 3 working days.
So there we have it. What I've just shown you is how fundamentally easy it is to orchestrate business processes with this new BizTalk orchestration technology. To change the process that happened when I go up to a website and order something by simply dragging and dropping a few visual elements onto a page is technology that is not available today. Now, what I've shown you was an example, but I'm excited to announce that later this week, Dell Computers is actually going to go into live production with the first part of their supply chain built entirely on top of BizTalk server. So to wrap things up, what we need to do to build the business internet is to orchestrate our applications, orchestrate our web services in an organized fashion to build business solutions. The technology that's going to allow you to do that is BizTalk orchestration, and it makes it as easy as drawing a diagram. Thanks. Thanks, Bill.
Okay. Well, the platform that allows all of this to work in a way that is going to have the kind of scalability and reliability that huge transaction loads demand is, of course, Windows 2000. We're very excited to have that product out in the marketplace. There's really incredible momentum built off of the pioneering customers we had who used the product and actually deployed it and gave us feedback prior to the formal release. With Windows 2000, of course, the message is quite clear. On the desktop level, the reliability, the performance mean that this will become the standard business desktop operating system. At the server level, the impact is more profound because here for the first time we can say that the PC model, where you have lots of choices, where you have great price performance, is also now the arena where the best absolute performance is available. We demonstrated this at the Windows 2000 launch by showing how the combination of Windows 2000 plus SQL Server could provide the highest level of transaction performance that any computer has ever generated. Now, part of the idea here is that you need to step back and not think of performance as being the characteristic of a single box. If we ever demand a single box, then we have a single point of failure, and we'll never get the kind of reliability levels we need for these internet applications. The answer is that the idea of scale and reliability really comes through software architecture. Now, this is the way that historically companies that really delivered high reliability always did it. It wasn't the mainframe that was used to run stock exchanges and phone networks. It was instead systems like Tandem that used an architectural approach that got all the different hardware boxes working together. Well, that's what we've really built in now to Windows 2000, the idea of software scale, so that if you need to add capacity, you simply take the latest, best price performance server, connect that up, we replicate the software over to it, and boom, you've got additional capacity right there without changing the application. And so the importance of getting that message out there, that there's no longer a trade-off between going for the low volume, high price type servers versus the mainstream PC server is crucial. We are moving forward in a very exciting way on hardware scale. So the individual servers will be dramatically more powerful. We have milestones coming up like the release of Intel's Itanium 64-bit processor. So those much more powerful servers are what we'll be able to combine using the software scale architecture. This year we've got a lot of releases that are the Windows 2000 foundation products. The data center server is about to come out. I mentioned 64-bit in the fall. SQL Server 2000 is really an incredible product. That's the one that we did the world-breaking TPCC benchmark on. Exchange 2000 is a huge step forward based on all the feedback we've had from the Exchange user base. Application Center 2000 is the thing that does these application deployments. Commerce Server is for easy building of websites. BizTalks, what we just saw a little glimpse of, and Host Integration is our classic product that takes setting up XML to a mainframe and makes that very straightforward. Tomorrow, Bob Mugley is going to kick off the morning talking about how these products are being used and where we're going with every one of them. This is the platform for new development of this next generation of applications. Over the last year, we've been talking a lot about how do we get the developer community to really move forward most aggressively in building these new applications. And we've been talking about what could we do in terms of product development, support, educational programs to really get this bootstrapped in the fastest way we know how. And we put together a very, very aggressive plan, the most dramatic plan in terms of investing in developer support that any company has ever come up with. It's a 3-year plan, and what we've got is a total of $2 billion that we'll be putting into developer support and training over the next 3 years. What that's about is taking the base that we've got today around Visual Studio, Visual Basic, all those programming skills, and getting people to understand the additional things about XML and all the related tools that are going to let them build the new applications. And so this is a real commitment on our part to this next generation. As I've said, the role of Microsoft in working with the breadth of developers has always been quite unique. And we're taking that to a new level with this $2 billion commitment to developer success. Well, in summary, What we're talking about is a software-driven internet. An internet that takes the PC platform both as a client and server and takes advantage of it to deal with the incredible capacity that's required. A software-driven internet that works on all the different devices, tablets, cell phones, in the car, on the TV. The tools are probably the key ingredient. Users will never understand that because we'll make sure they don't have to see what's underneath. But I think if there's any one thing that's really going to make it possible, it's the tools we've talked about this morning. What that'll do for digital business, digital collaboration, digital lifestyle is very, very exciting. And so we appreciate your being here. We appreciate your support, and we're looking forward to working together to tackle these exciting horizons together. Thank you.